Sego, everybody. We're back again with episode 6, and we're super excited to start. I'm Makasha Looking Horse. I'm from Six Nations. I'm 23 years old, and I work for the Indigenous Water Project. Sego Saragwego, Makasha Gets, Gene Gahagani Gohanjora, Wagatuhuni, Six Nations Nidawageno, and I'm a McMaster student.
Nyawa skana sogwegi tanadakwa niagiaji diwasa gaye niwago siagi ayongwaga niwago wenjo de o taikyoni niwage se de ahyak ni ho wenjo de nidwage no. Hello everybody. Good to see everybody again tuning in for this awesome episode of Oneganos water, basically, well, cold water. And what I said was, my name is Tanadakwa, 24 years old, Cayuga Nation, Wolf Clan, and I'm from Six Nations, but I was raised in uh, Gononda State at Newtown in the Longhouse there. But I've traveled frequently out here and stuff. But I'm a community member, traditional, as people come to know me now. And yeah, I'm the co-host. And today is basically just honoring the women here.
Yeah, we have an all-women cast right now. And we have Tina Nagata that's going to be talking. And she's going to drop a whole bunch of knowledge on us. She's amazing lawyer, and she's done super cool things in activism. And we have, I think that I'm going to explain a little bit about how we're connected to New Zealand. So they're on their grant, and that's what our outline is. We learned from a lot, and they visited Six Nations here at Gowaneo, and they sang with the Gowaneo students. They taught the Gowaneo students some songs, and the Gowaneo students taught them some songs. And it was really interesting. You can see in the picture we have Jock and Cleve and the students and teachers.
And there's Tina right there.
Yeah, and on this other picture on the left side, we have our flag flying next to their flag on the waka, which is one of their ways of traveling on the ocean. And there's only correct me if I'm wrong, Tina, but I think there's only 4 or something in the world. I'm not too sure. That there's only a few, and we got to ride on one waka when we were out in New Zealand. And Dr. Dawn Martin Hill, she's also going to be joining us, and she went out there.
Yay!
And they partnered to work together. And on the other side here, we have the students from McMaster University that traveled to New Zealand for 2 weeks. It was me, and then there was another young man. His name's Gahadilo, and he's from Akwesasne, that also went out there. And we went out to different maraes for 2 weeks straight. And it was honestly one of the best experiences of my entire life to go travel in different areas. And we went to different water bodies, and we went to the
hot springs.
The hot springs and the river that has personhood rights, which is really interesting because I think we need to head in that direction with our Great Lakes so that we can protect them. Because right now our Great Lakes, it's one of the largest freshwater bodies in the world, and they are extremely contaminated. We have that algae that can kill people, and that kills dogs and other wildlife. Here's
that kid's got his arms in his sweater. Must be cold.
Yeah, it was pretty chilly out there at the time. And that's the McMaster students, and they greeted us every single marae, they came out and they dressed in their traditional regalia and they sang to us. And then that's how I had to teach the McMaster students water song, like from Bear Fox, and the earth song, and so that we had like a cultural exchange, because everybody out there sings beautifully, but everybody out there sings, and so we had to sing ourselves.
And not everybody here sings.
And not everybody out here sings that beautiful. Yeah. So we had to try our best to respond to them, because that's what is respected, and we wanted to pay our respects to each marae that we visited. So,
and when it's your first time singing, you got to shake the nerves off. I mean, obviously, you know, it's not my first time singing. Most people know that I sing all the time, basically. But I've taught a lot of kids from around here too. Like all those kids you saw in the picture with Jock and Tina, all those kids have been basically learning from my peers and also us.
Yeah, and we also went out there to the United Nations to help support the Maori people and their, I think it was protecting their oceans. And I think Tina can maybe speak a little bit about that, but we went out there and supported them, and it was pretty awesome. But our next speaker is Tina Ngata, and
none other than Tina Ngata herself.
Yeah, and she's from New Zealand. She's going to be Zooming from New Zealand right now, so it's like, I don't know if it's super early or super late, but she's an Indigenous human rights and environmental advocate who promotes Indigenous conservations as best practice for a globally sustainable future.
Te aka Māori. Is that how you say it? Ngāti Porou. Is that close there, Tina?
Kia ora tēnā, kōrua tēnā koutou. Yeah, the NG is actually pronounced together like a N, just like saying an N with a silent G, I guess, but like how you say NG at the end of ring. Yeah, so Ngāti Porou is the name of my people. Yeah, tēnā kōrua.
It's great to have you here, Tina.
Look, lovely to be here, and he mihi tēnei kia koro tira kia koutou te whānau o Six Nations, Haudenosaunee, Mohawk, he mihi aroha kia koutou mai tēnei mokopono o te tai rāwhiti, no reira ko hikurangi te maunga, ko waiapu te awa, ko Ngāti Porou te iwi, tēnā koutou katoa. Yeah, I thank you for the invite to come and share some conversations, which are also a part of the best practice, conservation and conversations. And our conservation starts with conversations, right? That's how we do in our Indigenous worlds and approaches. And so, just really thankful for the invite to come and spend some time with you. My name's Tina Ngata, and I live on the my introduction before introduced me through my mountain and through my river, and that's our traditional way of introducing ourselves, is by introducing our mountain and our river. I live on the East Cape here, so you can see, we call it, the name of our island is actually Te Ika Maui. The boring colonizers just call it the North Island, but that's quite incorrect to us, because from our perspective, this map is upside down, and we're actually, by those understandings, I guess, the South Island, but the East Cape here is the tip of the fish. If we can go back to the view of the whole island, you can see it's actually a fish, and the head of the fish is at the bottom of the North, what you'd see is the bottom of the North Island. That's the head of the fish, and the tail of the fish stretches up. And I'm on the East Cape, which is the fin, one of the side fins of the fish. And so my mountain's name is Hikurangi, the tail that reaches up into the sky. And my river is Waiapu, and my people are Ngāti Porou. And where I live, yeah, is exactly where that dot is on the East Cape, the easternmost tip of TEK Maui.
Wow, that's awesome. I hope to come visit someday. I'm not one of the lucky people that got to go experience it, but
I
hopefully
know,
in the
Dexter.
future.
We would love to have you, and we would love to have. We're always trying to scheme and plot and find ways to get Kasha and Dawn and Cody, and we would love to have you come here. We would love to host you. So you can see we're a coastal people there, and the forest and mountain estate that's just inland of me is called the Raukumara Estate. It's a 250,000 hectare native forest estate, and it's the largest contiguous forest on our island.
Wow.
And so but from our area covers all of that forestry estate going all the way inland and south, and it also covers a good amount of our marine estate. So the name of the Raukumara stretches from the mountains all the way out to sea and into the basin, and we give it all the same name, which is an interesting insight to how our ancestors really didn't differentiate between land and sea. It was all territory, all one territory for our people.
Wow, very interesting. Play the poem now.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that, because we have also Turtle Island, which is shaped like a turtle, and it's interesting that like our places that we come from are shaped like what we respect, I guess, and what we live by.
Yeah.
And and I'm Ganya Gehan, that's people of the Flint. And
I'm Gayong Guanca. As said in Onondaga language, but Gayokono in Cayuga language, and Cayuga in English people language. But that just means basically people of the shirt, basically. Like
Beautiful.
no, not people
Lovely.
of the shirt, people of the pipe, or people of the pipe. And my grandfather told me that the word for pipe was a choktok, and that's how you said it in Onondaga. And we had these big long pipes, and it was carved from stone sometimes, or made from clay, and they carved their own pipe. Basically, everybody had their own, until we got the trader pipes and stuff like that, which is made from that white clay, and we had our very own special blend of tobacco and stuff like that too.
Beautiful. Thank you. Yeah. And well, we're considered so my people, we come down from the whale people, the whale riders. And so if you can go back to that map again that showed where I'm from, our ancestor Paikea came, yep, that one. Yep, that one. Our people, Paikea, our ancestor Paikea came from across the ocean on the back of a whale. And just near where that red dot is, you can, there's a little forest patch to the right of it, right by the coast. And just at the bottom of that is where, yeah, exactly there. Just where your cursor is now, exactly there. Yeah, that's where he landed. It's a little place called Te Pito. So he landed with the whale there, and he fell in love with a woman called Huturangi, and that's who my research center is named after. Huturangi was the woman that the whale rider fell in love with, and she had the mana, she held the, I guess, authority over the lands, many of the lands around that area. And her parents were canoe voyagers as well, who came from Hawaii or Hawaii Kinui, but they have been identified as coming back from Hawaii, and so they came together on that spot, and then from them in that area is where the people of the East Cape, of the East Coast, all descend from that union. And so the whales are, that's a migratory route for our whales. They come down along the eastern seaboard down to Antarctica and then back up again towards Tonga. And we also have a number of cetaceous mammals, our dolphins as well, our orcas that all migrate along that route. And so
That's so
I think, when you came to visit us, Kasha, that was not long after we had been um, defending our coastline from oil exploration vessels and seismic survey vessels. And we did that through using our wakahaurua, our ocean voyaging canoes, to go out and disrupt their surveying programs, which are 250 nautical miles off the coast. But those seismic surveys create terrible noise pollution, and they're really damaging for our ancestors and cousins that still live under the water there. So we went out to defend them and tell them that they weren't welcome, that they were trespassing. We issued them trespass notices and cease and desist notices under our law of the people of the Kairawhiti. And we left. We beat them. They also, I want to say, shout out to our ancestors and cousins. We weren't acting alone there. We said our prayers, and the sharks came and attacked their survey streamers. The day after we prayed for them, we did our ancestral prayers for them to go, for the survey vessels to go away. And then the sharks showed up and attacked the streamers and delayed them for 9 days, while they had to go and get new streamers brought in from Thailand. And they gave us time to organize ourselves better to be able to disrupt their grids, which we did. Yeah, so we were really thankful to our cousins that live under the water for what they did in that process as well. And then we took the fight overseas to them at the United Nations, because the oil company was majority owned by a Norwegian company, by the Norwegian government. And so we went to speak to the Norwegian government about their commitments that they made under the Declaration for the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and the International Labour Organization conventions, which secure Indigenous rights to our food systems and our sacred practices. So, and that was the meeting that we were at when you came to support us, Kasha, the inaugural Ocean Summit. And we just wanted to talk about the rights of Indigenous ocean peoples, because our Pacific Ocean, the Moana, Te Moana Nui Akua, we call it, is our territory, is Moana people's shared territory. So, we will always remember your support in those spaces. It was really meaningful for us. For us.
That is amazing. Awesome information.
Yeah, Nyawe. And I think that's really leads us into your poem that you want to share with us.
Sure, yeah. So I'll let you play it, and then we can speak to it afterwards. It's called I Am Hine, I Am Moana.
I am whenua. I am Moana. Between my thighs is life. I have birthed lands and gods and generations of ancestors. I birth change. I birth growth. Between my thighs is death. I am the last wail before your longest night. I am the cold embrace. I am the final word. Hine. With my voice, I open channels beyond the veil. I welcome the unseen and shift the space between us. I am Hine. I pull the tides within you. I command hordes. I bring war. I bring peace. I calm the gods. I bring release. I fed you from these breasts, which your book of men's rules bade I cover. Well, just remember, your aging grey hairs came from where? Know this, I was always here. These clicking tongues erased my names, even as they dictated their own demise. So don't you come along and think you save me. Recognize your life depends upon me. Understand your future lies within me. Realize that your fate rests with me. I am Hine. I am Whenua. I am Moana.
Wow, that video is so powerful. I got goosebumps.
Thank you.
We go.
Yeah. So that poem was a part of our virtual digital ocean, virtual reality exhibition, which was a number of activists and advocates who put together artworks of poetry and performance and visual pieces as well, and animated pieces for an online experience for people to engage with issues to do with the well-being of the ocean and our perspectives of the well-being of the ocean, as well as climate issues as well from our traditional perspectives. And that really is a poem that speaks to, the fact that our perspective is that the ocean is an ancestor, and that because we can genealogically count our ancestors all the way back to our ancestor ocean. We have the names, and we enshrine the names of our genealogies in our lullabies and in our oratory and in our stories. So we remember all the names of our ancestors going all the way back to the ocean, who's also our ancestor. And we have sayings like, the ocean is in our blood, and we cry and sweat salt water to remember that the ocean is in our blood. And there's a lot of we're always reminding ourselves that we are the ocean, and that the ocean is our first ancestor, that before there was land, there was just ocean, just the ocean and the sky. And that the first, that's also where love began, because love, the greatest act of love is to create life. And so that's where the creation of life started, inside the ocean. And so she's the home of love as well as the home of life, and she's in us. So we are her. We, just like we're all of our ancestors, we are her as well. And so the poem is really a reminder of that sacred creative energy and potential that comes through the ocean and then comes through us as the descendants of the ocean, as ocean peoples. But also reminds us all of, you know, how powerful she is. Not just that the ocean needs saving, but actually we need saving, and that the ocean is incredibly powerful and can teach us lessons as well. And so we must always be humble and humble ourselves in relation to nature in general, in relation to the climate, in relation to the planet, and certainly in relation to the ocean, because she's the source of life. She can also be the source of death, and in a loving way, that, you know, she will do what needs to be done for the sake of all of her children, the human ones and the others as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, there's aspects of, you know, reminders that we need to humble ourselves when we talk about trying to save her or be saviors around her. And just all of the different ways in which that sacredness comes through in our ceremonies, the way that our voice can open channels to bring ancestors through to sit next to us in our gatherings. And the females have the power to do that in our traditions, and the way in which the female voice can be used to call people together, to meet, to see justice, to seek justice. And you know, of course, there's as well the mothering potential that we have, the way in which we continue to be the portal for life to come into this world, and also the powers that we have to help people transition into the next world when their time here is in this form is done as well. And even though colonizers have come along and tried to erase the names of, I'm wearing a shirt that has all of the names of our sacred mother ancestors all the way up, you know, the goddesses. And the colonizer can try to erase those names, but it's so important for us to speak those names. Continue to speak those names and speak of our strength and speak of our sacredness as well. So it's all of those things, that poem.
Yeah, I think that we can definitely relate in our culture too, because when Sky Woman falls, the world is covered by water, and she's pregnant herself, so it's a lot of like life bringing to the ocean, and it's the ocean animals that helped her build land so that she can survive on a turtle's back that is now grown into Turtle Island today. So yeah, we have definitely a similar story with the ocean and the beginning of time. But we had a question that popped up on our Facebook Live, and one of our viewers wanted to ask, what oil company did you chase out?
So we've chased off 5. We've chased off 5 oil companies from our coastline now. That particular one that we were talking about earlier, that was Statoil and Chevron, who had partnered up for oil exploration along the eastern seaboard. Statoil is the one that's majority owned by the Norwegian government, but they're now called Equinor. And so what happened there was, you know, that when they do their surveying, their seismic surveying, they have to collect their data in a grid. And so we used our vessel to position ourselves in front of them so that they could not complete their grid. And every time they had to turn around, they lost that plot of the grid, that part of the grid. And it would cost them $100,000 a day to turn around and take their huge vessel, largest seismic survey vessel in the world, back again and try to start again. And so because they sell that information in grid plots, and so in the end it just became too expensive for them, on top of the brand assaulting and brand shaming that we were doing. It just became too expensive for them to keep on doing it. But also, like I said before, you know, our relations under the water were helping us. And then we also had a hurricane, a cyclone start up in the south and make its way towards us, which was helpful. And because our boats, our traditional vessels, we can handle high winds and everything. We surf along on the surface. They're big industrial colonial vessels. They had to leave because they can't handle high winds. And so we turned around and used the winds from the cyclone to get home swiftly. And they had to turn around and leave. And then they didn't come back, and then they surrendered their permit. So they left, and we were able to do that. So that was those two. And then the other ones were Tag Oil, Anadarko, and Petrobras were the three other oil companies which we've chased off since 2010. Those are the main oil companies on the eastern seaboard. And then we have other oil companies elsewhere in New Zealand, but OMV, Noble, yeah. But those are the main ones for our territory.
Nice.
That's awesome. And so you had like different elements helping you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oil companies, and which, I mean, it's really important to tell that, because I think people need to realize that our ancestors are right there and they can hear us, and whenever we call, they can help.
And they don't realize just how powerful, the natural world is. We come from the natural world, and in one little foul swoop, they could take us all out. Because that's the way we've always talked about here, is that you think you're powerful until you see something that's 10 times more powerful than you are, especially that big boat would be flipped over in the water, just that big oil tanker, whatever it is.
Yeah,
so that was ease.
Yeah, definitely very humbling.
Yeah, and you feel when you're out of the ocean, like especially on our traditional vessels, you feel the awe of our ancestors, of our ancestor ocean. There's nothing like standing in the middle of the elements with the wind and the waves and the water and everything all around you, to feel that you have those ancestor elements right up in your face, and it's really humbling. There's no doubt who has the actual power in that space. And the other thing that we did, though, is that we did a haka, which is like people call it a war dance, but it's I mean, that's only one reflection of one type of haka, but it's also can be a celebration, and it's an honoring as well. And so we did a haka, which was with our youth. It was largely a youth, the people who were on board the waka with us were like as young as 15, and the average age, I think, was 21. I was one of the elders on the waka, and then the captain as well, and then the rest were relatively quite young, and I was so proud of them. And so when we did the haka, it was to the vessel, but it was also to our ancestors under the water, and our relations under the water, and the takahi, the stamp of our foot on the deck of our vessel, of our canoe. That was us sending messages down to them to let them know we haven't forgotten our responsibilities, we haven't forgotten our obligations, we haven't forgotten our connections to you, and we're here, and we'll do everything we can to protect you. Every single stamp was communicating to them that we were still there for them. And that was a deeply profound and moving moment for us to be able to tell them in the ways that our ancestors would have, that we were still there for them as well. Really powerful acts to take out for them, because it's not just about us and the colonizer, it's about us and our ancestors and our commitments to them. Yeah.
And if we're talking about our ancestors, I have a question. Can you tell us and the audience more about the ancestral concept of legal personhood rights within a colonial legal system?
Sure. So similar to that poem, I am Hine, I am Moana, that, that the idea that our natural elements around us are our ancestors and that they have equal rights to us, that is an old concept, and it's our concept. And so more recently, there's been developments within our colonial legal system here in Aotearoa to recognize some of those perceptions in our colonial law system. So we have the Awatupua Act, which recognizes Wanganui River as having its own standalone rights, equal to those of rights of humans. And so we're looking at the Wanganui River there. It's on the west coast. It's not my river. I should be really open about that. But you've been there, Kasha, and yourself and Dawn have been there, and obviously I've been there as well. I have relations there, but it's a amazing river with a beautiful, amazing people who live along that river, and they fought for many years to have the rights of that river recognized in legal personhood. So legal personhood is a concept that's within our New Zealand legislative system and legal system to accord the rights of a person to these natural elements. So it's Wanganui River, Mount Taranaki, which you're looking at there, also on the west coast, and the Urewera Forest, National Park Forest, which is in the middle of Te Ika Maui, the fish of Maui. And so, yeah, those are just, I guess, not just, it's really important for us to be shifting our frameworks of how we work with them, but there's still a lot of work to be done as well, how we perceive them, not as resources or something to extract from, but as, and also not as humans. And I think that's something that gets a little bit lost in the translation of legal personhood, is that when they don't have to be turned into humans in order to have legal rights. And in fact, if we think that we have to turn them into humans for them to have legal rights, it kind of misses the point. The issue is that they should have the same rights as humans, even though they are a forest, they are a river, and they are a mountain. And so, as I mentioned earlier, we introduce ourselves through our mountains and our rivers, and they are the guardians of us. They're the first guardians of us. And so our rights and responsibilities to looking after us in that space as well. Legal personhood is an important step in the process, I think, of changing the way and communicating how we perceive of these ancestors. But, we don't have to look too far to see that within colonial legal systems, they're quite fine to allow for actual people to have our rights abused and to be placed in danger as well. And then also within these colonial systems, there can be, we can, how would I put this? They can be overturned as well. They can be overturned. So if you look at like the earliest of the enshrining of the rights of nature, Pachamama Constitution that was adopted by Ecuador and Bolivia, those are ones that inspired us. And leaders like Evo Morales, they've really shown some international leaderhood around enshrining the rights of Mother Earth and the rights of nature, and they took that on board as legislation for their government. But then, because of international colonial systems, and international imperialism, and people like Donald Trump, who really wanted to get into the tungsten reserves in Bolivia, then funding and supporting a coup to overturn Evo Morales and to undo that amazing work that was done there around the enshrining of the legal rights of Mother Earth and nature. You know, those things are still under threat whilst we still are not challenging the broader colonial systems that they sit within. So we still need to continue to challenge those systems, both in our nations and between our nations at an international level, because groups like the World Bank, World Trade Organization, International Monetary Fund, and just, you know, a lot of the international groups are born out of imperialism. And still manifest and maintain systems of imperialism and international privilege of European systems. And they'll utilize that to overturn and undo the very good, important work, legislative and legal work around the rights of nature, which makes our relationships, our own international relationships, like what we're doing right here, you know, you, me, Dexter, Dawn, sitting and inspiring each other and holding on to our relationships and growing our own international forums and strengthening the global Indigenous village. That makes these relationships so much more important to be able to progress the interests and rights of nature. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And so do you want to tell us like a little bit about like what you do and how you can share the Maori design for the ecosystem monitoring? Because I don't think a lot of people know.
Sure.
What that is.
So yeah, and again, it comes back to that whole thing of understanding the systems, right? And flipping the systems, making sure that the way that we're looking at these things is grounded in who we are. And so one of the ways in which for us, you know, we grow law and we grow our traditional laws and legislation, but also the ones that we see now. A lot of those are built out of research, right? They're built out of science. So for us, our Indigenous science, our Maori science are the things that inform our Maori laws. And so for us, it's really important to make sure that when we're looking at the evidence in front of us around what law needs to be grown or put in place or applied, that the justification for that law also comes from our ways of knowing and being and doing and seeing. And so those are, we come from long-standing, proud and honorable intellectual traditions and science, which involve observing the environment really carefully over time. And that time is not commodified and cut up in terms of a government electoral or campaign term. A lot of time, a lot of research right now, colonial research, is funded out of treasuries that are determined by a political power that comes in this year, announces their budget, that goes into the treasury. The treasury then informs research budgets for a country, for a nation. Those research budgets are applied to by research centers. They have to have their output ready within a 4 to 5 year time circle so that the political group that created that funding based on their constituents and power can then report back to those groups and stay in power because they're advancing their ideology. Yeah. That is like the worst way to carry out science. It's completely, it undermines the honor and the validity of the science from the very beginning because it's based upon maintaining power systems. Mm-hmm. For us, the time and it commodifies the time and cuts the time frames up as well. It doesn't allow for relationships of integrity with the communities that you're working with. It doesn't allow for long-term understanding of the patterns of what you're looking at. And so for us, our science is based on an extension of the science collected by our ancestors, but also carefully looking at what's going on around us and making sense of it within our world and our ways of knowing and being. And those patterns are informed by the lunar cycles, by the cycle and the way that our moon and stars and constellations, the ascendancy of our constellations relates to the patterns of the water systems around us. The coolness of the ground under our feet, whether it's dry, whether it's moist, the sound that it makes, the scents that are on the breeze in front of us, the fogginess, like the line of sight to the next mountain, how clearly we can see it, the species of birds flying above us, the behavior of those birds, the nature of their calls, the coolness of the water, what the creatures are eating in the water at different times of the year. All of that needs to be collected over time to begin to see the patterns. And when you understand those patterns, then you understand what is out of kilter when something is happening that doesn't belong in those patterns. And that is when our Mother Earth speaks to us. We need to understand all of those different patterns to understand her language of when she needs to tell us that something isn't right, so that we can have her guide us in the plans of her healing, as opposed to us assuming the right to tell her what she needs. She knows what she needs, and she will tell us through her language, and her language is the language of all of those different elements of nature coming together. So our observation systems, which includes observing us as members of the environment, we're not objective observers. When we do this observation, we look at everything that's going on around us, and then we turn the lens within us and we observe our internal ecosystems to say, okay, and what's my voice telling me today? Am I being kind to myself as well, or have I been mean to myself? Like, has my voice been very judgmental towards myself lately? Am I lifting myself up, or am I bringing myself down? Have I been sleeping well? Like, what are my own systems and patterns doing? What have my sleep cycles been like? How am I feeling, physically and spiritually? Where has my mind been at? What has been the dominant thought for me for the past few days? And when you do that, you also start to see the connections between the environment and particularly the moon. Because we always have to remember, the moon has huge impact upon water. The moon lifts the ocean up. The moon controls the tides. And we are 60% water. Our hearts and our brain are nearly 75% water.
Yeah.
You can't tell me that the moon does not have impacts upon the waters of people when it has that kind of impacts upon the waters of the planet. Exactly. And so you start to see the patterns of what happens with our waters in our body when we observe ourselves at the same time as we're observing the environment around us as well. And you get important learnings about yourselves through that.
I agree with you 1000%. A lot of our people here, they really need to be reintroduced to this type of knowledge. That's pretty amazing, because it's really reflective of our own type of knowledge as well, like what we have here. Well, what I've been learning.
Well, my mom's been trying, but it's just so hard. And I think because we're just surrounded by cities, and it's just really hard to.
Back on the mainland, things are really about progressive, like in the colonizers' world. We can't really focus on what we're doing because of the constriction that money holds on, that they put on you. You can't really be free as we once were anymore.
Yeah.
So great information though. That was good.
That's kind of the importance of our food systems though, right? And our food and our housing movements are really about, there are things that should not be subject to capitalism. Food is one, like the basic human rights for survival, clean air, clean water, and food and shelter should not be subject to capitalism. And if people should have every right to expect to have those things for them and their families and their children, and to not have those things come under threat. And so when you do secure those things for your people, the political advocacy that you create space for is immense. And the colonizer knows this. The colonizer knows that if they can embroil you in a system where you are so hyper-focused, they can make it so difficult for you to put food on your table and a roof over your head, that will consume your every waking moment. And it's the politics of distraction. They call it the politics of distraction, so that you're so consumed with putting the food on your plate and keeping the roof over your head, you can't possibly have the energy or time to engage in political questions and larger considerations about the power systems around you. And it makes it much easier for you to just accept that you will be cared for, or you have to accept that you'll be cared for by another system. Because you just have to, you only have the energy to focus on what's in front of you right here.
That's why we tell a lot of people to practice their language every day, practice giving thanks, because then it puts them in a state of mind of saying, well, I'm a part of this world, not really into this world. But on the topic of language, how has language played a role in cultural revitalization and decolonization? And
totally. The language, as I said before, what we call our reo, there's our reo, which is our ancestral reo, te reo Māori, and then there's the reo of the whenua, right? So understanding those systems and the patterns of the planet, that's a language in and of itself. And I want to acknowledge that it's not just what's coming out of your mouth, it's what's coming out of the mouths of the whenua and land all around us. And even when we are engaged in our language revitalization, we need to always remember also that our language as ancestral languages of the people of the land and the ocean stems from that language of the ocean and the language of nature as well. And sometimes I think we get a little bit, we don't quite honor that connection, and we can be focused on the linguistics and focused just on the language of what comes out of our mouth, and not acknowledge the inherent connection that our ancestral Indigenous languages have to the language of the earth. And so, that's really important, because when those relationships to the patterns around us, when that dies away, there's language implications for that. When for us, we're coastal people, and you can hear it in the dialect that we speak. The sound of the ocean comes through in the ways in which we enunciate our words. And the people who live in the forests have a slightly different cadence. And the people who live in the mountains, again, have a slightly different cadence, different language, different words as well. And so nature impacts upon our language. And when for instance, our food systems go, when we lose our food systems, there's parts of our language that are lost with that food system, because we're no longer going out there every single day or every single month or whatever time that is, and engaging with it in that sense, in that practice. And so there are parts of our language that are lost with those food systems as well. And so the two things are, what I'm getting at is that the two things are intrinsically tied together. Remember, learning our language is a way of remembering and honoring the connection that we have to the environment, because it's an environmental language. And likewise, it's reciprocal, and connecting to the environment also is something that helps us to nourish and maintain, and looking after the environment is something that helps us to nourish and maintain our language. Reciprocal. So the two are intrinsically enshrined.
Yeah. That reminds me of like what I've seen before was like these indigenous people in the mountains, they were communicating by whistling because that was how they could.
They could travel it through the mountains, and
Yeah.
it would carry such a
Yeah.
long way. And here we do have that sort of state of mindset as well. We with regards to relating to things that are what people think is abstract, right? We call the stars our ancestors because they basically they're in the future, and what we see from them is something from the past. So they're actually telling us the future of what things going to happen. But nowadays, a lot of that old star knowledge is forgotten. There's only very few people that know that sort of knowledge. And how does the youth use the star knowledge to navigation with no technology?
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, my land block that I live on, I'm really blessed. We get to live on our ancestral lands. And I'm always mindful of that every morning my babies get to walk up and place their feet on the land that their ancestors and their ancestors and their ancestors walked as well. And there's a strength in that because, there's a communication and a subtext in that we're still here and we still hold our territories in spite of what the colonizers have tried to do.
Mm-hmm.
But that land block is called Tākena Te Whetū. Tākena Te Whetū means the ascendancy of the stars. And all along our coastline there are ancient village sites and landmarks and marae that are named after, and mountain tops that are named after star constellations. And those star constellations we would use to plot our pathways back across the ocean. And even when we're out at sea, we can use those constellations and their pathways and understanding their relativity to each other to be able to plot our pathways back home to different islands. And so that was how many of our ancestors came here, was on the ocean voyaging canoes, using that star knowledge, which also, but it's a combination of star and environmental knowledge. It also includes, the temperatures of the water, the creatures that you see in the water around you that we know exist at different parts of the ocean at different times of the year. And as well as the different species flying above you, the birds, because we know some birds will only go so far out to sea. So if you see them above you, you'll know that you must be close to a land mass. And then there are some that travel huge distances, and they would, tell you the same thing. So it's a combination of, at nighttime, the stars will kind of help to give you the confirmation of the direction that you're heading in based on the signs that you're given during the day by the species, the temperature, the tides, and whatnot around you as well. And so again, it's through a long standing intellectual tradition of collecting that information and understanding the patterns and the rhythms of the environment and the skies around us, to understand the dependability of them and what they're saying to you, and then track your movements by that. We would use that to travel, but we would also use that information to determine, you look at our maramataka, our calendrical systems, it'll tell you what are the good days to travel, what are the good days to stay home, what are the days to plant, what are the days to fish, different fish as well, what are the days to go eeling, what are the days for, so, and then those also were placed upon an understanding of the different times of the year. So this phase of the moon at this time of the year meant something slightly different to another time of the year. And so all of those things we use to help us understand when to travel and how to travel and where to go. Yeah.
Well, great information. That reminds me so much of how our people we do things around here, how we give thanks throughout the year. usually it's just around food and whatnot because we're land people now, so we usually just give thanks for like the food and the natural environment. But we just do the sort of the same things. We watch what the animals are doing, how the land reacts to basically what we do, because a long time ago we used to live directly with the land and with Mother Earth. And the way you call them your relatives, that's what we call the animals too, is Akwesasne, which is our cousins or our relatives, basically. Even the people who, call them our enemies or whatnot, we call them our Ngāti, which means our relatives. But they had very similar cultures to us too, and really,
Yeah, we did the same.
Yeah.
We do the same with people. The word for enemy for us is huariri, which just means my angry friend.
it's a good one, yeah.
Yeah.
Those are so funny.
Thank you, Gina. That was
Yeah.
Yawa.
We also have we also have clans that are passed down through our mothers, and we also like we take on those different responsibilities, whatever our clan is, and we all have responsibilities to each other, to I guess people in our same clan, and like different responsibilities to people who are different clans, and there's different types of rules with that. But I wanted to ask, like, what are the women's roles in an environment, stewardship, and protection?
Oh, sure. So, even with COVID, we noticed that the ones who stood up to do the checkpoints, to put the checkpoints in place, were largely women, not exclusively, but largely women. And similarly, the ones who make the stand to look after the environment, a lot of the ones here, it's not, again, not exclusively, but largely women who are leading those movements as well. And I don't think that's intentional, although our tribe, Iwi Nation, are matriarchal. A lot of the land was handed down through women, through the female lines, and a lot of our marae meeting places are named after women. And our leaders were women, and women were our speakers and orators in our gathering spaces as well. And so we have a really long, strong, proud tradition of female leaders, particularly on the East Coast, but which we're famed for, I think. But I think, that's also reflected across Māoridom, and also it's reflected across Te Moana Nui a Kiwa, but that just not has been captured and highlighted by colonial storytellers and historians and observers. But it certainly is there across our nation, across our islands, and across our ocean. Environmentally, I'm always really mindful of us being water bearers, naturally being water bearers as women. And also, though, that our irawaihine, the principle of femininity that comes down through to all of us women, but also like all of us carry irawaihine. And that is really about creative potential. If we go back again to that poem that I played there, I am hine, I am moana, our ocean, in her first iteration, she has male iterations as well, which is tangaroa, but her first iteration was Wainui Aotea, the mother, the great expanse of water, and that was the first space of creation. So that was the first act of love, which is, to create life. And so she resides in us, and all of those qualities of her still reside in us today. And so we're cyclical, just like the ocean and just like the patterns around us. We're cyclical, and the moon, she pulls on our waters and then releases our waters as well. And we have this, just an unending story of caring for the collective, which is what is really needed now, of caring for waters, which is something that's really needed now as well, because we've always cared for the waters, even when it's the birth waters or whatever waters, we've always cared for waters.
Mm-hmm.
And being willing to sacrifice ourselves and put ourselves on the line for that as well. You know, we dislocate our bodies in order to create life and bring life into this world. We will sacrifice our own well-being time and time again to look after the collective and secure the continuity of our people. And I think that, you know, the roles that we carry in looking after our environmental campaigns now are manifestations of that long-standing, all the way back to our, you know, the first creative potential of our oceans and the skies, and the, you know, it's a manifestation of that when we step into those spaces to protect the environment and to protect our communities. It's something we've always done.
Yeah, definitely. I think that relates perfectly into our grandmother's minute that we have. And then after that, we have a surprise guest with us. And I think we're going to lead into, well, now for your knowledge.
Yeah, Martina. So this grandmother's minute. I'll just talk about grandmothers for a little bit before we play the grandmother's minute. And the grandmother's minute is just basically a statement from the clan mothers. And a clan mother is basically a person who is like sits high above everybody else. It's usually the clan mothers, chiefs, faith keepers, and they all work for the betterment of the community basically, and the whole people of the Longhouse. Specifically, they all work together all throughout the Confederacy, and it's usually the mothers, clan mothers, who put the ideas into the chief's head, and then the chiefs will stand up and relay the message in a way that's meaningful and can be understood by all. And not all the time, you know, not all the time everybody's going to agree on it, but if you can get the majority of the people to be on your side, then that's, you know, that's progress. Because if you try to please everyone all the time, you end up pleasing nobody. So these are this is a little statement from the clan mothers, and the clan mothers are basically like the high ups. They sit behind the chiefs, but they're in the ear of the chief. And my grandmother was a borrowed for a little bit as a clan mother, and she taught me a lot about it. And then all of my great aunties, they were basically all clan mothers. My grandfather, who was a hereditary chief, always went to his sister, who was a clan mother. Her name was Bernice, and she gave him all the information and all the knowledge that he had ever wanted, and it was a tough thing to watch her go. But this is the grandmother's minute.
Each of us today must commit and devote ourselves in whatever way we can to use the power of our human capacity for connectivity, to breathe life back into our Mother Earth, who owns our bodies.
With the knowledge and awareness of global warming, the community took a stand once again, just as our ancestors have in the past, to reclaim green spaces here on the Haldeman Trap. Our intent was not to confine or restrict other people from where they have put their homes, or to gain money and material wealth. Our true intention was to bring justice related to our land.
Sa hong sung kwa we no dani sa gwa diso sa defsano ne iwat na ne agwego sa de dwaya de gwenio na gyong kwa hong we ne gando ne san yoi hwa na san ye ha na to wan zage wano ha de kino de tino ho kwa ne gutun ne ganyo hot ka we ne gutu gwego sa de dwaya de gwenio ta songa ne hona we de gwego sa de dwaya de gwenio ne gando Gwego di hadi foye na gyong ongwe hongwe ne tuni nai to hong ne yo hando ga hawi doges di nenge aso ne ongwe de nya destak na ni doktage ta dogwa nenge ne dogwa ni hon wanzu da doga sa ne hadi wa ye na hadi wa ni ya to gi ne ya we asun to ni na nga ne ongwa yan shra na nga we wa ge ongwa wanza we wa ge whatever keeps sustains our life, that's what's in the middle of that dish. So it's our responsibility to protect that for the unborn generations, the faces that are coming. They say, oh, that means the coming faces from the ground. So our job is to protect that and ensure that it's there for them. So this is the law that our Creator has given us long before contact. This is what settled the territorial battles that were happening.
Because of the relationship of women as being the nurturers and the ones who bring life, bring creation, bring the Creator's spirit into this physical world, her role is the same as our mother, the earth, as being the nurturers and the caregivers and provides us with life. And so as women, we're given that responsibility when we bring those babies into this physical world.
Okay, that was our little bit of our grandmother's minute. And to continue on what a clan mother is, she's one of the people that are capable of doing so, and one of the people who know the knowledge, know the language, and have all of that basically like all that wealth inside of her mind. And she knows the history, she knows herself, and she was basically one of the people who grew up and believed that way her whole life, and she lives it, breathes it, and speak it. I mean, you don't just give it to anybody, but we're basically like that's like who our presidents are, to put it in like a term that everybody can understand. But a lot of my family are all in those positions, and we have a guest on, um, Louise, if she wants to talk now, or we do have a question too that came up earlier.
Let's just introduce Louise and after she talks.
Okay. So this is we'll introduce Louise now then.
Yeah, so we're gonna introduce Louise McDonald, and she's a bear clan mother from Akwesasne.
Sego, my younger sister from down under. How are you over the great salt waters?
Sego, Mama Bear. It's so lovely to see your beautiful face. Yeah, it's good. We're good. We're okay here. All the better for seeing you and connecting again with you. And look forward to when we can do it in person. But for now, it's healing in itself to be able to share some time with you on here.
Yeah, well, definitely a loyal fan to all your work and your activism. And every time I go into ceremony, I mention your people, and I remember I remember you, and I remember Pua Case in the woman's Webs of Wisdom that we shared a few months back. So these young people are doing a great job, aren't they?
Oh, amazing. For us, you feel, I feel good about, and actually I also feel like, we just need to learn how to step back sometimes and move to the side more easily, because I feel a lot more comfortable in some of the leadership coming through from our next generation than I do with much of what's being demonstrated by our current generation in power. But so thankful for leadership from people, from the likes of yourself as well. And yeah, we constantly hold you all in our prayers. Yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you. I don't know if Makasha, you had a question.
Yeah. Do you have any knowledge on like how we can move together in, I don't know how, I forgot like how to frame my question, but I guess, do you have like any advice to our audience who is watching and wants a better environment, or who is worried about our environment right now? Because our audience is majority young people, and so a lot of young people down in here in Six Nations have demonstrated that they're very worried. So do you have any kind of words of wisdom or words of hope, either from like our stories or from your life experience?
Well, you know, in Haudenosaunee ways, the simplicity of it is to just always have gratitude. And that's what the whole Ohondagaliwadekwa is all about. It's just on a daily practice to acknowledge creation and for us to not forget her. And I think that's really important. And I think one of the other things is to look at women leaders like Tina, who are leading the charge and Puakase in Hawaii, and Leonore Tenney down in Guatemala, and many other women who are stepping to the forefront, not trying to self-agenda or to, you know, making their own call to fame, but who are truly invested in the protection of our Yukitnistan Huja, our Mother Earth. And they're the ones that are doing the science. They're the ones that are doing the lobbying. They're the ones who are calling the people together to stand in the front lines to hold back the invasion of our precious Mother Earth. And, you know, this is a jewel of a planet, and there's so much to live for. And so for me, it's like, you know, the philosophy of less means more is something that the younger generation should embrace, and not do like what our generation did, where we live in access and we're frivolous, and to move away from plastic and to move away from fossil fuels, and to go back to the way that our, not too long ago, less than 50 years ago, the way that our grandparents and our own parents and myself used to live. And that's in small, simple gardens and small food sheds, and, you know, taking from the land only what we need, and to stand in protection of her, and to constantly, every full moon, to pray to the water, for the water to be part of every ceremony that we practice. So, and, you know, it's not that difficult to embrace ritual around and not take for granted those things that sustain us each and every day. So you young people have a gift, which is your youth and your strength. And you in your own generation needs to own, you need to own the responsibility of what's coming towards you. And so, you know, learn from us what we did right and what we did wrong. And, you know, you're going to have to own it and clear a path for yourself. And, you know, don't repeat what we did, but take the lessons that we've set forward. And, you know, if there's an injustice somewhere, then, you know, make it your life commitment to right the wrongs, and to hold close, to hold very close, Yukitnistan Huja, because she's all we have. And, you know, we're beginning to see a transition and a trend in societies all the way around the world where women are stepping up to leadership. And, you know, we need to be in partnership with our men and with our men leaders in Haudenosaunee practice, and to not be afraid to lend a voice to the injustice, and not to be afraid to lend voice to what we need to do collectively as a people to make sure and ensure that the future generations seven copies down the line, that they still have something to be nurtured and nourished from the land. So it's a real important job. And I think as Indigenous people, and from our creation story, it was put forward that Indigenous people would be in charge of the land, and we're her original stewards, and we should take that job quite seriously. So, not to go on forever, but you got these young people are doing a really great job, Nyaweha, and Gunalukwa, and keep up the good work, and make some babies, Makasha.
Yes. Yeah, we always say that, we gotta outpopulate them. Outpopulate them. But I wanted to just I couldn't say it better. That's exactly what I would have said as well. We need to. Your grandmother was their grandchild. Stop in for a cup of tea with them, and just spend time with them. And our grandmother Earth is no different. We often go out the door, and we're always on the way to something. We're on the way to go and do something. We're off to go and do this. Go out the door and sit down and spend time with her and listen to her and look around at her and look, what's flying around you, what's buzzing around you, what can you hear the furthest away, what can you feel under your feet, and really spend time. And, as I was saying before, our observation traditions and our science are based on that, but it's also a form of ceremony and a form of meditation, and the thanks, the way in which you give thanks is, it's exactly the same. To do those things, never ever underestimate how powerful it is for us and for her around us. If you truly believe that she is a living being, not just because of legal personhood, but pre-existing, that she is a living being, then why wouldn't she be listening to you and feel it and appreciate it when you spend time to listen to her and spend time acknowledging and giving thanks for her? So it's a really powerful thing. That's what's given me my energy and faith to keep doing what I do. Just that, for me, that's the really powerful act for us to all take out. It's healing for all of us.
I agree with you.
Yahweh for your words, Louise and Tina.
Yahweh, Yahweh.
Yahweh Goa, your wisdom is much appreciated, because a lot of people don't have anybody like you in their lives. So I think it's important that you share your voice and share your wisdom with everybody.
And it's important, as Haudenosaunee people, we are a matrilineal society. So all of our lineage and history and identity basically comes from your mother. You do have responsibilities back to your father as well. You're just as important, but that's where our identity comes from, is from your mother. We're not a matriarchal or patriarchal, we're a matrilineal, and that means that that's where your family comes from, and that's who comes first. And my grandfather once told me, he said, you don't put any woman above yourself. Basically, you're eye level. You're both the same. The only woman that you hold higher and high regard is your mother, because that's who you come from. And as a people, like in my history as well, our relationship with men and women, our relationship is basically treating them, equal. They're on the same level. They have equal amounts of responsibility. So Yahweh to both of you guys.
Yeah, and I'll let you know when I have babies, Louise.
Good one. I hope
Like
you find a name.
Years.
Might be a few months, who knows?
No.
Yeah.
I would like to travel first and maybe
Take
have
the
a
babies
house
with you
and a ring,
Those are all colonialism ideas, whatever.
Onyawe.
Now we can bring in our community
Yeah,
guest.
community guest, which is Dr. Dawn Martin Hill, who is also my mother and great friends with both Tina and Mama Bear. They know each other and go way back, especially Mama Bear, way back. I've known her since I was a little girl. Dawn, would you like to come on? So Dawn is my mother. She's Wolf Clan from Six Nations. She's a cultural anthropologist. She's the team lead of Oneganos, which is a groundbreaking research team. Yeah, if you
Have you got yourself together, Don?
Yep, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Hi. Hi, Louise. Thanks for coming on and surprising Tina.
It was fun. That was fun.
That was the best.
We had the real grandmother's minute. I wanted, because Louise is a clan mother that I've worked with for, the kids were like 3 or 4. So 20 years now, Louise. We've been trying to do things to help each other out. And research is just one way that I can elevate the voices that matter, which in my view are the voices you've already heard from. Some of the science is necessary, and it's an interesting concept to have Indigenous knowledge lead science. It's new. Usually culture is just window dressing for Western science. Or they just do an opening prayer and a closing prayer. So I think it's important to put the right voices and right knowledge in the forefront. And the scientists that we have accumulated through 4 different research grants are amazing. They've been doing really good work for the community. And I have to give a shout out to them because this is really new for them. It's new for us. And that means that we'll probably make a few mistakes here or there. So it sounds good, Indigenous knowledge leading, but the system itself is a hierarchy which doesn't work well with our people. So we're just trying to bring our ancient knowledge into a modern concept. And when Tina talked about taking their ancient laws, and that's always been my question when I would listen to the Great Law when Jake was recited many years ago, and I was trying to figure out how do we apply that now to improve our environment and our people justice issues. So I think it's something that we're still trying to figure out. So some of the research that we've done together, I was just going to share a small piece of it, is looking at how we can take science and move it forward in a Haudenosaunee framework. And women, every team that we have, including the grant that Louise was on, and she is on all our grants, are led by women. And that wasn't a conscious thing, it just happened that way. So I don't know if the PowerPoint can play, or if you can show some of the research we've done to discuss how Haudenosaunee women's roles and environment really go back to the sky world. And Louise and I were talking about this earlier today. The teachings that when she fell, a lot of the knowledge is in the sky world. The Earth Grasper, one of the first tasks given to Sky Woman was to get water. And so water plays a prominent role. and it's embedded in our Constitution, the Great Law. So I think, you know, the 50 clan families that Makasa was talking about earlier, I mean, that design is mind-blowing, that there's not a single thing within the Great Law or in our Constitution that you need to tweak or change. Children had rights, women had rights, the environment, we had responsibilities. So I think bringing those laws forward to apply them to right now, today, how are we managing our environment here at Six Nations? What role and responsibility do we have? So it's good to know the stories, but you really need to know how to apply it. And I think that's what women are exceptional at. One of the projects we did was we brought back some of the Hewitt collection. And Hewitt was one of the first ethnologists. And he transcribed everything in Onondaga, Mohawk, some Seneca. And I brought back, I took the faith keepers up to the Smithsonian and they pulled what they thought was important. And then we had some of our if you could go back one, we had some of our best minds translate. And so I knew the translation. For example, I think a lot of our people know who Fenton is. He's not a nice person, but he also didn't translate properly. So a lot of the translations even that he did were wrong. And then those end up being books and we're stuck with what he said and they're wrong. So the way we did translation is we had many people translate, and then each word would go through a vetting system of other local language speakers. And one of the things I wanted translated was the woman chief. And the way that they translated this, again, this went through not just one or two people, but many people. It clearly states under the Great Law that women are the stewards of the land. And they called, you know, the females chieftainship. So it was very similar linguistically to the power that they held, but that it was a uterine law. And that's, again, going to the fact that we're matrilineal, but it's illegal under the Great Law. It's legally binding that we are responsible to uphold our responsibilities to the land for the future generations. So having this translated was really important, because I know a lot of our people know this, but I think reinforced, you know, some people who may have speculated that no, women don't have power. So if you go to the next slide, I think that the law of the woman chief, that it was actually Gibson who they interviewed for this, talks about her burden that she carries and how her eldest warrior is one to assist her. So there is a lot of fuss about that word warrior, but it is exactly the way that it was said in the language. It translated into warrior. And implicit in that is that protection of. So it's literally in the Great Law, the Constitution of our people, that it is a women's responsibility to uphold that and sustain the protection over time of those lands. So if we go to the next slide, we then look at how colonial intellectual legacies has undermined clan mothers right from the beginning. And Louise and I have talked about this quite a bit. Her role was seen as a threat, especially to Benjamin Franklin, who ended up writing the quote about how Iroquois men cling to the strings of their mother's apron, because often it was the clan mothers that wouldn't align or go to war with colonial regimes. And so they really set out a campaign to undermine women, much like you see the Trump administration doing, trying to undermine women. So a couple hundred years, if you don't speak the language, and you've only been exposed to what the West has written about not just our people, but any Indigenous people, then you probably have a perverted idea about the way our laws operate and the role of women. And that has impacted our people as well through residential school. So if you go to the next slide. A study came out when we were at the UN. Tina helped us get into the UN. Louise and I would have been stuck on the outside. So she bailed us, got us in. But one of the studies that was being talked about at the Indigenous Peoples Permanent Forum had come out through this intergovernment panel of 145 scientists from 50 countries. These are not people that have anything to do with Indigenous people. They're simply scientists doing ecosystem assessment globally in their regions that they're familiar with. And all in all, I think we all know that we're in trouble as a race, a human race, and we can't sustain this level of pollution and consumption, and including here at Six Nations, including the Grand River. It's everywhere. But one of the things that they did find, besides it being unsustainable, is they found that, if you go to the next slide, wherever Indigenous people, and this is important, wherever Indigenous people controlled their environment, and I mean controlled, so not like where we are fighting to have Canada uphold our treaties and stop stealing our land essentially, or taking over our river, taking our water, whether it's Nestle or any other company. We don't control those. And we need to reassert our control. And one of the things that can be said scientifically is, if Indigenous people control their environment, the environment does better. And that's a scientific study that took years to undertake. So what their conclusion was, wherever Indigenous people managed and controlled their environment, the environment was not even or very less severe impacted by humans. So the ecosystem was doing well end result. And that was the one finding that they came out with. And so when people say, well, what can I do? How can I help? How can we stop climate change? It's fairly simple. Regardless of what group you belong to, if you return the lands back to the management and control of the rightful heirs under the Canadian law or American law, Maori law, then you're actually upscaling the opportunity that climate change can be less severe. So land back, while it is a movement, it's based on science, both Indigenous and Western. If you return the lands, but I would say, and this is important, if the Indigenous people that you're considering returning land back to, whether you're a private owner, a corporation, a church, however you're operating, you need to make sure it's traditional in its governance, and that women are in positions of power, because some of the newer Indian Act leadership, which is very male and has been male for some time, that since they were created by the government, tend to go along with Western values and ideologies, which means, you have development. So I think it's good to say give the land back, but do due diligence in that it's traditionally governed group is in power, and that women are essentially still have authority in decision making, which has been removed in so many communities across North America, diminished, almost completely excluded. And it's not just Haudenosaunee that had women in those positions. It was Cree, it was Anishinaabe, Sioux. Women had strong leadership, and it just played out differently in different cultures. But where you see that diminished, and as an anthropologist, traveled far and wide, it's pretty evident, in fact, in some studies that have been done called cultural continuity, like which communities, instead of looking at who's committing suicide, they looked at who's doing well in the country. And one of the findings was, guess what? If women are in positions of power, control, decision making, that seemed to be a what they call a protective factor of well-being. So Six Nations, I think, is well suited to be reclaiming those lands and managing them, but we really need to pay attention to the gender roles in those communities. And just if you go to the last slide, if you look worldwide, no, that's like, go forward. If you look worldwide, what's happening with COVID, which countries did exceptionally well were run by women. And that's because women tend to care significantly about their children and grandchildren in ways that men, not saying they're better than, but they tend to manage the affairs, the domestic, particularly affairs of their people quite well. So if we could restore that balance, I think that is our responsibility. And Makasa taking on Nestle, you know, I want to thank you, Tina, for mentoring her, and Bev, her going to the Confederacy. She was getting upset that people didn't seem to care at Six Nation, that this, I mean, the only way to talk about it is breast milk. It's breast milk water made specifically for human beings. It's the best water on the planet, and it's under the ground, and it's being completely wiped out. And if you see what's happening in California right now, Nestle and many other companies drain their aquifers where the land actually sinks, and now you see it's on fire. So it's incredibly, incredibly important to take care of those things that you can't always see. And I think she was about ready to give up because she couldn't get anybody interested, because it's something they can't see. And it was your support that kind of re-inspired her, reignited her to go back to the Confederacy and ask one more time, you know, would you support this? And they did. So I want to thank you for it's so important, Louise, as well, the help that you give our young people, because it's unfair what we've done to them, what we're leaving them, and what thoughts they have about their future. I couldn't even imagine at 20 thinking that. So, you know, supporting young people is what is most important if we want to have a future. But I don't know if you want to say a few words about that cease and desist, because Nestle packed up and left. And I think her going to the UN at the Youth Climate Summit and calling them out in her opening prayer, again, those things matter. But maybe you could just say a few words about that pretty interesting legal suggestion you gave her.
Sure. Yeah, and you know, Makasa is already, you know, so remarkable and inspirational for us as well. And that's in no small part due to the people who have raised her and the values that have been, that she's been surrounded with as well. I really want to acknowledge that, you know, that those who have supported her and raised her with those values, because, you know, that people like Makasa, sorry to talk about you like you're not there, Makasa, you are there, but people like Makasa don't just happen. They come from a deliberate process of being raised with fantastic values and people around them. The idea, you know, for us, when Makasa was telling us about what she was, you know, the movement that she was carrying, our groundwater is so important. You know, that's our most ancient water, the really ancient water. And in that poem that I spoke about before, those are from underneath Antarctica. Those are the sounds that you hear in those ancient spaces. And it's the same with the sounds that you hear in the aquifers as well, when we've put microphones into those aquifers. It's an ancient sound that, and so it's so important for us to protect. That's where hine, you know, our ancient creative potential of water, who manifests in many modern ways, but she's still present in her ancientness in those places, in the underground reservoirs, in the groundwater systems, and underneath the ice caps. And so it's so vital that we protect those waters as the home of our ancient spaces of hine. But I want to say, you know, that what resonated for me was that, you know, you have your great law and you have your law of peace. And that was the system that you guys supported us through when you came to support us at the United Nations, was us upholding our ancestral law. When we went out there, so our government gave them permission to prospect and remove oil under their law. They didn't listen to our law. And we needed to say to them face to face that the colonial government gave you permission from their law, but you don't have permission from our law, and assert ourselves as the true law of that land and the true law holders and makers of our territories, of our ocean marine territories as well. So we issued them with the trespass and a cease and desist notice under our law, and told them, made sure that they understood that we were the true people of that land. And a part of that is unmasking the legitimacy. So we have to, the legitimacy that they hold to carry those extractive activities out, be they Nestle or oil companies, that is a false law. And they will continue to speak about that as if it's legitimate, but it's not legitimate. So when we issue them with our laws, we are unmasking them, unmasking the legitimacy away from their actions, and speaking the truth and acting on the legitimacy of our law. And when we do that, we are acting, we're doing our law. We take it out of the space of talking about it, out of a theoretical space, and we are applying it. And regardless of what the colonizer might say, we must do those things. We must, if we really believe in ourselves and believe in our laws and believe in our ancestors and our stories, then we have to do more than just talk about it and commentate the demise of it. We have to actually act it out into being and manifest it. So that was our advice, was that when we did that, it was really powerful and it made a difference. And I believe it was upon those acts that nature responded as well. And so that was our advice, just from our experience, was to do that as well. And I know that was something that was not just from us, but many others were saying it at the time, but certainly we were really supportive of that. Yeah. And so proud, really, really proud of
it was really intense, and it was a great opportunity to walk with clan mothers and deliver the cease and desist directly to Nestle and tell them, like, you're not welcome and you're not to stop what their illegal actions of taking water. And I think that's really powerful just to see that, because it's our traditional leaders handing and practicing our traditional government roles and responsibilities, along with, like, standing there with youth like me, to continue that kind of resilience. It was really awesome to be there and to provide that kind of space, I guess, for that to happen. Yeah, it was awesome.
And I think I do think that the young people need to understand the Confederacy or the traditional laws, clan mothers are only as strong as their clans. And I think our people have become conditioned to just like, well, you do it, you're the leader, because they're used to seeing this hierarchy. And no, the point is that you're there to, you're the power of that great law of peace, right? So if you don't act on it, if it just becomes like poetry and it stays in a beautiful space because it's so beautiful just to listen to, but if you don't act, make it actionable, then in a sense colonization is winning, because you're not applying it. And I think young people today really need the support of leadership and mentors, because they have a lot on their hands. And part of what we wanted to do with GWF, Global Water Futures, youth capacity building is straight up through every grant. Knowledge mobilization is another really big piece. That's just a big word for saying, no, I don't want to write a bunch of scientific journals that only other biologists or other engineers or hydrologists or anthropologists are going to read. That's pointless if the people that you're working with don't understand the science, either Indigenous or Western. Then we need to tell our stories. So I think the virtual reality, again, we've been working on this virtual reality knowledge center, and we'll show a little bit of that, where we're going to have both treaties. We've got Jock and others. They're going to interview Louise in 3D and VR, virtual reality, because I want people to care about the water, right? And I think storytelling and sharing our knowledge through an experiential forum. And again, when I asked the traditional people that are advisors, what did they think about, virtual reality? Mohawk College has been amazing to us. They've been helping us with their new fancy program in multimedia VR hologram. And they said, I said, they've offered to kind of work with us to create, share our findings in a way that's meaningful, which I think is through our stories. And I honestly thought they would just shake their heads and say, go away. It's not, well, that's not happening. And they all just kind of jumped up and said, that would be amazing. And so, you can work with somebody for 30 years, like I have, the same people, Norma, who went with, Norma General went with Makasha, Mary Sandy, another clan mother. Like these people that have been working on the reclamation, they're amazing women that are always supportive of any work that advances our people. And they took to it. So it's just like all I did was shift everything now to virtual reality. So then I have a lot of people my age saying, oh, why are you doing that? Like, that's really Western. And I'm like, no, it's storytelling with senses. You can capture a lot more through virtual reality than you can through a one-dimensional film, because it's more dream state. So putting science in that space, I know my colleagues just kind of, I think I freak them mostly out and they want to run away and they're kind of stuck. But when it's done, then they're like, oh, that's brilliant. So it's a struggle. The front lines aren't just on the front lines of protest. The front lines are on intellectually, in science, in getting grants and making Indigenous knowledge the lead. Like those are all first, right? And for us. So I think your virtual reality, put our virtual reality, I don't want you to show it because ours doesn't look anything like that, but I think you're going to mentor us to help us get the creation story down a little bit better than we have. So do you want to talk a little bit about your virtual reality? Is so beautiful.
Yeah, thank you. I think, it's the stories that mana wana wouldn't be anything without amazing stories. And I know that, you know, coming together with your guys' work as well. And I hope we do get a chance to, you know, bring our stories together, that again, what we'll see will be some amazing stories. And so we're able to leverage off that with technology, thankfully. And Mana Moana was actually a project that started a couple of years ago, a group of artists, activists, and advocates who wanted to tell our stories, but also our perspectives of issues like climate change and what's happening to our oceans and what's happening to our freshwater systems as well. The talent using our tools, our storytelling, means our art, our oratory, our music, our poetry as well. And so Mana Moana, because all of those things, you know, even the way in which we understand knowledge these days through colonial systems separates knowledge into all of these different disciplines that were created by Greek philosophers. And so you wind up with these real silos of thoughts where science is separate to art, is separate to all of these things. But our ways of learning and knowing and being, all of these things are enmeshed together so that our oratory is science-based, our art is science and maths-based. And so we, you know, in honoring that truth, we wanted to give voice to our science and our knowing, and through our art forms, and that's why we put together Mana Moana. It's traditionally, well, in its first iteration, it was a public art event where we projected our voices and our artworks onto a water screen, a screen of spray of water in a lagoon with loudspeakers speaking. And we're going to be doing that again in November with these artworks. But with COVID, we needed to find another way to give voice to these artworks. So we developed our virtual reality exhibition, our digital ocean, which is what you see. So it's on, if you can go to it, it's online and live now, which is manamoana.com. Yeah, manamoana.com. Or there you go, down the bottom there, digitalocean.manamoana.co.nz will also get you there, but I think you can just go there also through manamoana.com. And we even have ceremony in there. So before you can go in there, you have to listen to one of our females singing an incantation kind of prayer, karakia pau, to open up that space for you to go through the portal, which is one of those carved images. There is the portal to enter into the site. And then all of the artworks exist over as projections over the ocean. And yeah, if you go through them all, they're all very deeply profound communications around. There's the portal, we call it the Stargate. And so after you listen to her go through what we call a pau, then you're able to enter through the Stargate, and then that's a form of ceremony for us as well. And then once you go through there, then you have a whole series of artworks that you can interact with, which include dance, yeah, as I said, and poetry, or meditations, guided meditations as well, that embed these really deeply political voices as well.
Wow, amazing. And that's all in virtual reality, so you're like experiencing it, you just can't really touch it yet.
I wish I had goggles on right now to see.
You can actually, there are a couple of VR goggle pieces in there as well. So there's 2 pieces that are filmed using virtual reality technology, so that you can use goggles and be completely immersed in the artwork. Or you can have a look around. Some of them have been 3D scanned, so you can circulate your way around the artwork in a 3D sense as well. So there's multiple ones. Our one is like that you're looking at, I Am Hine a Moana, is more just, you know, watching it play out in front of you, like you're in front of a film being projected over the ocean. But then other ones are virtual reality goggle pieces that where you're inside, you can look around, and the artwork plays out around you, even behind you. And so yeah, there's different artworks that you can interact with in different ways.
Wow.
As well. And so
I can't wait to go.
yeah, that one is Mana Moana meditation, which is about remembering the role of water inside of ourselves and the relationship of water to air as well, which is particularly important when we're talking about climate issues. The role of our ocean as the lungs of the planet alongside our trees, but the ocean is also the lungs of the planet that absorbs carbon and has such an important process in relation to climate change. And that's also happening inside our bodies because, you know, it's the waters of our bodies that oxygenizes our blood. Water plays such an important role in oxygenizing our blood as well. So that's what carries the air through and oxygen through our system and gives life to our organs and to our bodies as well. So Mana Moana meditation is an artwork it's an open-eyed meditation that uses our artworks and our stories to remind us of the role of water inside our bodies, at the same time as that role of water, to help us honor the role of water in relation to the planet and the air around the planet. Yeah.
Yeah, wait for that. Don, do you want to talk about?
Yeah. So this is just some of the footage. Ours is a little different, but I'd like a piece like Louise is going to be the voice of the water, and we're going to have it in Mohawk, Cayuga, and in English. So it'll be shown in those 3 different languages, and we'll also do the VR, but also the computer. So part of it is just the Grand River and what it was like prior to contact. And then we're traveling, the water, the river is going to be speaking before all of this, setting up the role of water. And then the science part is testing the water, how clean was the water prior to European settlement. And obviously what little data there is, we'll be including that. And then obviously as you travel to contemporary times, things change. And then the 3rd series will be climate change preparedness.
If you're wondering what that is.
The sturgeon, yeah, he goes right through the canoe, and it's a experience. It's a dream state experience. It's not meant to be literal. Like your senses are what we're addressing here. And this was done by Mohawk students.
Mom, we can't hear you. I think your speaker went out.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yep.
You're talking.
Yeah, so we're just, we went to Guestlist, and they helped us out, and we did a lot of research to, this will be dressed like an ancient longhouse with our traditional foods. So this is just a sample. We have to wait for class to get back. COVID obviously interrupted where we were at, and we'll start again in the fall virtually. So we want them to fully understand Haudenosaunee before they get into the science and into contemporary issues of our water. Grand River, as you may know, was one of the dirtiest in North America. And it's been slowly coming back thanks to the Grand River Conservation Authority, but Six Nations stretch is particularly bad. And, I think you talked with Charles about environmental racism and the fact that they dredged the river here quite deeply so that a lot of the pollutants stay along the reserve. So we'll be addressing that as well in the VR. We also then go to the Knowledge Center. And this is where we have, wampum belts, treaties, as well as checking the water, teaching people how to use water monitoring equipment. It's not that hard. And the app that they're developing, you'll be able to download it. Anybody can download the app. So you can see what's in your water in real time. The sensors are being made by the engineers. We're also installing sensors on people's tap water. Just try to make science accessible to everybody, but also our science, the traditional ecological knowledge that Six Nations has shared so far with the project. I don't know if there's sound with this or not. Like, we took the sound out because we didn't really work on sound. Is it
Tina,
working or no?
it's a go soon.
Okay, is it working or no?
I can't really hear no sound from there. No.
Oh, that's too bad. So yeah, they're speaking in the language and they go over the different wapums. We've got Jock doing turtle teachings. But since Tina has to go, maybe we can just stop it there and say the Knowledge Center will have both the Western findings and it'll have Haudenosaunee knowledge, from wampum belts to roles and responsibilities of citizens. People think treaty people are just native, but like, we made treaties, our ancestors made treaties with your ancestors, right? So you're treaty people too. You have roles and responsibilities to uphold, and it shouldn't just fall on Indigenous young people to carry that burden, or women. We need all the allies that we can get if we're going to clean our river up, decommission those dams. There's a lot of work that needs to be done to bring the health back of our waters. And I think, Makasa learned when the Wellington Water Watchers, Council of Canadians all stepped up to help her. She wouldn't have been able to do a lot of the things she did without that help. So allies, we need you, right? I just
Yeah, there isn't one person that doesn't have a role.
No.
There's not one person that doesn't have a role. Every single person has a role and a responsibility in this voyage. Yeah.
It just happens to be women that need to tell them to get moving, and we'll help you, but you need to get moving to not only learn what's in your tap water, like some of the findings that we totally did not expect at Six Nations. This is in people's tap water, not their wells, but in their tap water, coming from their wells, was arsenic, mercury, chromium, aluminum, things that we just thought it was farming runoff, phosphorus, bacteria, and we weren't even going to test for those things. But listening to the community, they pushed us to test for heavy metals. You can't clean that out of your tap water. So it is something, the next 3 years is going to be finding solutions to clean up the problem. But we certainly want to do as much as we can. We got drone river of the Grand River drone footage, and I don't know how long you have, Tina, but you can literally see where we started on the reserve here, the runoff coming into our space. If you look at where that Onondaga community hall is, right in there, that area, there's coming a tributary just before that, where it says cutting edge signs and engraving. Along there, all the runoff coming downstream from Cambridge, Kitchener, Brantford is coming to us. And if he shows the footage, you can literally see Makasa took them out on the water. I think it was cold. It was in the late fall. You can see the water they're sending to us, which is wholly contaminated. That's their sewage. That's their pollution. And so we're working on finding out exactly what Six Nations community is absorbing, and And then the other difference with the drone footage that you can see, and this will be in the virtual reality as well, is if you look on the side of Six Nations, and then you look at Caledonia coming in from the bridge and the dam. I don't know if he has that set up, but those dams were built with Six Nations money. Number one, the one in Caledonia, if you look up Grand River Navigation Company, that was our money, because there were no banks back then, that they built that bridge right there. And they also built the dam. That company went bankrupt. That dam serves no purpose other than to basically keep the garbage with Six Nations. So that the dredge sinks to the bottom, and then the cleaner water filters over the top of the dam. So as you get further away from Six Nations, the Grand River is actually fairly healthy and clean. You can actually like see fish and wildlife and turtles, and but when you get to Six Nations, you see no life, because it's just been over a century of downstream sludge, waste, pollution coming to us. So something the clan mothers and the faith keepers that are on our advisors, they want us to figure out how to begin to decommission these dams that serve no purpose other than recreational, meaning they like the deeper water to run their little toys, which also pollute the river with gasoline. So this is the bridge, the dam that I was talking about, but there's two on each side of Six Nations, and decommissioning dams is something we're going to be looking at with our governance and our legal team, as well as engineers, to find out what we might be able to do to clean up our section of the water so it could sustain life again. It doesn't have any of the original fish, beavers, muskrats. A lot of those things have abandoned because it's just so dirty. So there's a lot of filming that we did last weekend. Dexter helped us out there with my daughter Ashley, who I had to pull out of my hat because of COVID canceling who we had. We had to do a social distance demonstration in the longhouse, but all of this will be 360 view. So if you're put the headset on, you can look around and participate in your own way, because you'll see what's behind you and what's in front of you. So we're really excited about celebrating our knowledge, but also our teaching, and hopefully people will understand why our guys are out there getting arrested and beat up, trying to stop even more development from happening on lands that don't belong to them to develop. Those things need to be sorted out. So it's about law and governance, and knowing, if you have the knowledge that it really belongs to us, then you don't get timid and think, oh, they're losing jobs. Well, guess what? We've lost a lot more than jobs the last couple 100 years. And we need, it was 6 miles wide on either side of the Grand River from the mouth to the source. We have 5% of that land today. And what is there? The river is the dump for the rest of the towns. So the fact that they want a little piece of land outside of Caledonia is like nothing compared to what belongs to our people. And that's our children's inheritance. So I think those are things we're trying to resolve now. And it's complicated because we have an elected council that I believe wants the best for the community. Like nobody's 100% wrong in terms of what they've been understand. But I think that our people are starting to come together, and not conquer and divide needs to end. And we need to find new ways to work together to govern ourselves. So I think that's what the Maori kind of have resolved. And I know there's still issues There always will be, but I think that the model that you have put forward is certainly resonates with some of the issues we're facing here, because all our people matter, right? Not just one group or another. So I think that's what our research hopes to share in the virtual reality. Everybody has a responsibility, regardless of your disposition or your political affiliation. You gotta go, Tina.
I'm about to get kicked out of the place. I'm like, they've shifted me from one room to the other, and now I'm outside on the balcony. So I'm like, just keep going and pretend I'm not here. But yeah, they're about to kick me out because I'm actually on the way to somewhere. But I've so enjoyed. It's been great medicine for me to be with you, my sister Dawn and Makasa and Dexter, and I just want to and thank you so much for the beautiful surprise of Mama Bear as well. That's great medicine for me when we bring our hearts and our voices together in spaces like this. So yeah, kei te mihi rawatu. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Tina, so much.
Yeah, we will see you, and hopefully at the UN next year.
Yeah.
I look forward to doing some work together.
Yeah,
there is questions for you.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but maybe Makasa can get some of those answered from you later when you're not getting kicked out.
It's okay. I can answer a quick question.
Yeah, here I got him.
It's it was no, not that one. The one for Tina. It was it says, would you say that divide and conquer tactics fall under the same distraction strategy used by colonial governments against Indigenous peoples?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely they do. And that's not a new tactic. Like if you read Lao Tzu's Art of War, the divide and conquer and seeding distrust and seeding mistruth within the ranks of the enemy is a long-standing old war tactic. And so we see that happening now, where people are also, I would say, co-opting symbols and references to our movements of self-determination and Indigenous, for lack of a better word, sovereignty. And they're co-opting that into movements that are actually about white supremacy and the far right and the alt-right. And specifically, I'm talking about movements like QAnon, who capitalize upon Indigenous trauma and our experience of being oppressed. And then they say, therefore, you should not take COVID seriously, not wear a mask, not listen to the government, not stay at home, not do those things. But a lot of those things are centered around, concepts of individual rights and concepts of individual interests. They're in direct contrast to our Indigenous approach of thinking in a collective sense about collective well-being and the well-being of our elders and the well-being, also of immunocompromised people, the well-being of the community. And so, but they can very easily capitalize upon those mistruths to cause division within our communities. And then we're not able to have the unified stand that we need to have in order to redetermine our futures and self-determine our futures as well. That's an absolute straight out of the colonial playbook, and we've seen them do that in our nation, in our country, and we've also observed them doing it in other countries as well, where they will pretend to be an ally and pretend to understand where you're coming from, but actually the greater interest for many of those groups is one of having us put our bodies on the line to destabilize the situation so that they can then come in and completely wipe us out and reestablish their systems of white supremacy and undo the progress that we have done over generations now of hard work. They'd like to undo that and reestablish the good old days where white supremacy reigns supreme.
Mm-hmm.
And so definitely the divide and conquer aspect is that comes through really strong in the colonial practices, and we have to be really clever. I call it setting up intellectual checkpoints, just like we've set up checkpoints around, I've seen them, be set up around reservations. We set up checkpoints around our territory. We need to set up checkpoints around our mind and carefully consider the information that people are trying to bring into our minds and what passengers they might be carrying with them into our minds, and what their intentions are with that information as well, because some of it can be directly counterintuitive to our collective well-being and our Indigenous movements. Yeah.
I agree with you 100%.
You nailed it. You nail it every single time. I wish I could and speak like you, so precise. But Nyawe, for your words, I think that you definitely answered that question very well. And you answered every single question amazingly. And Yahweh, for all of your knowledge and sharing your time with us, because I know it's a lot. Was 2.5 hours now, which is crazy, but I think a lot of people learned from our talks, and it will be online forever. So I think it's really important for what you said and shared with not only just me and Dexter, but other people and viewers, youth who are like us and want to be like you someday. Great.
A hero, basically.
Yeah, you're basically a modern day hero. You should wear a cape.
Hero. She's a hero.
You know what's amazing too?
I really appreciate the opportunity to spend some time with you all. You're already leaders in your own right. You're not leaders for tomorrow, you're leaders for today in your own right. And I'm often in awe of all of you, particularly in the way that you support your communities, because just to, and with my final words, go back to support what Louise said. It's really not about one person. It's not about a messiah. It's not about one person coming to save everybody. It's about our collective beliefs in ourselves and our own distinctiveness as well. And all of you have your own distinct strengths that I'm in awe of, and really thankful to have spent time with you. Yeah.
Yahweh, and we'll definitely keep together.
Yahweh. Let's go and get it.
Ona.
You know what I thought was amazing too is that Don this whole time was treading water. I could not believe that. Oh heck, that was funny.
We're still on, but so thank you for our viewers,
our guests,
and if you want to follow us on any of our other platforms, we have one more episode next week, and then we're going to take a little break, and then we're going to start back up again. So make sure that you stay tuned. To next week is our last week for a little bit. So
follow us on our social media outlets. You know, we're on.
It's all Onegnos. So just remember Onegnos. If you put in OHN, then it will pop up on any of the platforms, on Facebook, on
the URL.
Yeah.
The Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Like, follow, comment, subscribe.
See you next time. Ona.
Go and get it. And thank you to everybody.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much for Hannah and Catherine and Colin and our team who was behind all the tech stuff, because me and Dexter could not do it all by ourselves.
We and Dexter
could not do it all by ourselves. So Meow and Goa to everybody on the team. Onagihia.
Peace out.
Toodaloo.
Keep that pose.